Welcome to Module 1 of the motorcycle test. The first manoeuvre is to walk the bike backwards from one parking area into another, parking the bike between the 4 blue cones and then putting the bike onto the side stand or the centre stand, whichever the examiner asks you to do.
Straight forward? Yeah. Cool.
The examiner will talk you through each element of the test to make sure it's fully understood. At Mallory Park we have all the room for you to be able to practice each element of this test. Some you'll find easier, some you'll find more difficult. The most important thing is to have plenty of room to practice, and obviously we have the racetrack to be able to practice all these manoeuvres. On the slalom, make sure you go around the first cone, don't go riding past it, and make sure you don't knock any cones over. It's a basic slow speed manoeuvre which leads into your figure of 8. The figure of 8, between the blue cones, you must complete 2 figures of 8 successfully to be able to move on. You're not allowed another attempt at it, so it's going to be nice and smooth, and as you can see it's to your advantage to go a little bit wider on the second cone to enable you to become a little bit tighter on the first blue cone and avoid any other cones. Once the examiner's happy with it, he'll ask you to pull over and stop.
Want to do the evasion first or the stop first? Stop first. Okay, I want you to go up. You see the blue cones, the red cones. I want you to go through that gap, follow the red cones round, back towards the red cones. You're going to come down here between the red cones through the speed hand and just go in a straight line here. I'm going to stand here, raise my hand like that.
This is the emergency stop procedure. It's important to get up to speed, so don't worry too much about the top bend there. It's getting up to speed between the yellow cones which is the most important area. A lot of people do have problems with this if they haven't had room to practice. Now at Mallory Park we have all the room to be able to practice on a daily basis, to be able to accelerate through the yellow cones and stop when the examiner puts his arm up. The whole layout of the Module 1 test is available for you to use at Mallory Park on a daily basis to ensure that you're familiar with the environment you're going to be getting into, so you don't make any mistakes on test.
And we can revise it to 4 days for you over the phone. So we always follow it up with a phone call just to check the details and make sure you are on the appropriate course. Alright, lovely. Thank you very much.
The U-turn's fairly straightforward as it's in an enclosed area. There's no curbs, no cars, no camber to deal with of public roads, but you must look as if you are on a public road with appropriate observations. If you're looking to do your training in a school playground or a public car park, these slow speed manoeuvres can be achieved. It's not a major problem. It's the high speed, it's the swerve and the emergency stop that you need the room to be able to practice. And obviously at Mallory Park we've got plenty of room for you to be able to do that. Now at circuit-based training at Mallory Park we always teach people how to counter steer for cornering. Now this is a a manoeuvre which you will need to understand and have practiced counter steering at speed to be able to successfully complete. If you try and steer it like a bicycle, it's not going to work. You must counter steer through the blue cones and counter steer back to be able to get into position to stop safely. If you don't achieve the speed, however, you will fail. That was only 49 kilometers per hour. There must be a 50 kilometer per hour minimum speed, and you're only allowed 2 attempts to achieve this. So if you do need a second attempt, take your time, nice and steady around the top bend, and then as you're coming out, start to build up the throttle, and don't throttle off before the yellow cones. Keep the throttle open and counter steer through and on the brakes to stop the bike. But don't knock any cones over. Again, if you knock a cone over during your test on any of the elements, you will fail the test. You don't get a second chance just because you're knocked a cone over.
56 the second time. Put this on his head. Gonna go again?
Now these are common mistakes that do happen, and we want to encourage you to try this test as many times as you want to on day 1, day 2, day 3 of your direct access course, so you can get familiar with the test and understand exactly what you're doing, because you only have 2 attempts, and 2 attempts only on the real test. It's got to be right. That's much better. You can hear the drive through, the speed is achieved, and no cones have been knocked over. That is what we're looking to achieve for you. That will pass any client, and then we can successfully move on to module 2, which would be the road ride.